get situated here. All right. I know we're competing with some really nice weather outside. I see we have a Pirates fan here. I'm a Cardinals fan, so we're both out of it this season, so we have nothing else better to do.
We won last night.
Okay. Small victories, right? I mean,
I'm supporting one of the local kids that are pitching for the Pirates.
oh, really? Okay. It's a local ear product. Oh, who is it?
Isaac Madison. It matters.
Okay. Oh, I gotcha. So we already have a
And you just hit the forward arrow
forward one?
on there, not the play.
Not the play. Oh, no. There we go. Okay. All right. So hopefully we're done with our technical issues. So good evening. Well, it's a small turnout. We'll keep this relatively informal. I want to thank everyone for coming out. I know it's a beautiful night. It still feels like summer out there. I've lived in Erie long enough to know that summer ends quickly, and it is short. I want to thank the JES for inviting me to lead the Ben series, and the CAM folks for being here and broadcasting this. I hope I kind of redeem their faith and have something original and important to say in what is a very tumultuous era. My talk is titled "Everyday People Aren't Stupid: The Men's Crisis and Elite Culture." Everyday people aren't stupid. Cassandra Sever, who is on the left up there on the screen, she knows this. She's the daughter of a rural South Carolina hairdresser. She was reared in working class America. Today, Dr. Sever professes sociology at the nation's oldest and arguably most prestigious women's institution of higher learning, Mount Holyoke College. A foot in both the ruby reddest and sky bluest of worlds gives her unique insight. From this, she posits that working class Americans believe, quote, "My identity is not worthy and how I live is not good," end quote. From suicide rates and life expectancy to family dissolution and political nihilism, evidence of what Sever terms, quote, "a culture of despair," abounds. Economics, to be sure, are part of this. Deindustrialization, globalization, and union busting have hit the working class hard. No one really needs to tell us that in Erie, Pennsylvania. Evidence of that is all around. A nebulous term, the working class. It means the working class possess less formal education, they make less money, and generally hold service or manual labor jobs. But in 2025, class comes down to the diploma divide. A college degree is what determines a contemporary American's class and life trajectory. In the age of Donald Trump, it is the diploma divide in class that shapes American politics. In 2024, a majority of low-income Americans voted Republican for the first time in generations. Trump took 56% of voters without a college degree and 55% of all men. Kamala Harris, meanwhile, won the college educated by 14 points and those earning $100,000 or more. And Trump's win was not just with the white working class. In relation to 2020, he increased his share of the non-white, non-college vote by 8 points. Kamala Harris had fiancé Luke Skywalker and $2.3 million in campaign cash from Harvard faculty, and that's exactly why she lost. Trumpism is buoyed by a multiracial working class coalition. To defeat Trumpism, or to, more importantly, to understand Trumpism, we must first understand America's class divide and its sources. To understand the men's crisis is to also understand our class divide, its material and social roots, and the role that the social justice intelligentsia plays in promulgating it. Between 1979 and 2005, the wages of those with a bachelor's or postgraduate degree jumped by nearly 25%. In roughly the same time span, college degree professionals, or the top 20% of American households, gained $4 trillion in wealth. The bottom 80% divvied up the crumbs. At the time that the college degree earned 25% more, wages for those with a high school degree, or those who dropped out of high school, fell. By 2023, the median weekly wage for a working class man, $852, was only a smidgen higher than it was in 1979 when adjusted for inflation. To be sure, working class women still lag behind their male counterparts in pay. But this gender gap pales in comparison to the diploma divide. In 2025, the diploma divide is America's class divide, and the diploma divide is increasingly a problem for men. In the 1980s, men were more likely than women to hold a college degree. That reality has flipped. 64% of men have no college degree, compared with 57% of women. Today, women comprise nearly 60% of all college students, and that number climbs every year. All working class Americans face strong economic and education headwinds, but working class men face the stiffest challenges. Globalization disproportionately offshored their jobs. Artificial intelligence promises more of the same. 3.1 million men drive a truck for a living. It is the most common job for a high school educated man in America. But driverless, long-haul vehicles have already arrived. Trucking jobs will soon dissipate. They're not going to disappear. They're just going to be fewer of them. Richard Reeves, who penned the widely lauded Of Boys and Men book, observes, quote, "The long-term story here is of growing wage gaps by social class for both men and women, but with working class men faring worst of all in terms of trend," end quote. To worry about men, especially for those on the political left, is for it. For a generation, America's left intelligentsia rightly turned its egalitarian focus to sexism, racism, and homophobia. Strides were made, much work remains. Sexism, racism, and homophobia are real obstacles to Americans seeking their part of their nation's bounty. But in 2025 America, we must add issues of class, and working class men in particular, to the mix of those left behind by an economy and culture in rapid transition. The 1994 North American Free Trade Agreement pushed nearly 1 million working class manufacturing jobs to Canada and Mexico. 5 years later, in 1999, China earned Most Favored Nation status. The so-called China shock, or shift of industry to China, pushed another 2 million working class jobs overseas. And I'm doing work on this, writing something about free trade in the 90s, and I've seen numbers that have claimed that that number is actually 4 million. It's millions. It's at least 2 million. It's a lot. Globalization and free trade have undoubtedly enhanced American wealth, regional ties, and national security. The American consumer clearly benefits. Trade is a complicated economic and foreign policy issue that demagogues easily turn into political gold in the past and in the 2020s. But the benefits of free trade largely flow to the wealthy and the educated middle class, people like me, and knowledge economy metropoles. The working class, meanwhile, foots the bill in lost jobs in devastated communities. Drive most anywhere in the Rust Belt and you see the physical carnage. Walk our neighborhoods and you witness the human toll of deindustrialization. Now, personally and politically, ideologically, I have my entire adult life. I call myself a free trader. I think the free exchange of goods and people lead, and this is empirically proven, to a more affluent and stable world. But at the same time, what we need to understand is that free trade, we need a free trade that benefits more Americans. Free trade that benefits Americans in the aggregate, meaning we can argue that cheaper goods abroad, right, raise standards of living for all Americans in the aggregate. But that simply isn't good enough. Disproportionately, the benefits of free trade flow to the highly educated and the middle class and above. And as a member of the professional middle class, I'm the one who profits from free trade. But even as a free trader, I recognize that working class Americans have been left out. They're the ones who foot the bill of these free trade agreements. Free trade most certainly hurts working class women, but it is men who have borne the brunt of the job losses. The left is very comfortable understanding these material and economic forces. Paychecks matter. The demise of working class incomes drives the men's crisis. But humans are also driven by intangibles. Globalization came on the heels of second-wave feminism and a long overdue revolution in Western gender roles. Losing their traditional role as provider to wage stagnation, globalization, and women's liberation, working class men from all races have struggled to find their footing. Detached from robust connections and meaning, working class men drop out of the workforce, lose ties to families, and too often die young and alone. Now, again, I'm going to talk about myself here just for a second. I'm a feminist. My wife, Dr. Sam Mason, is a prominent research scientist here in town. I'm a son of a single mom who worked 2 jobs to put on the table. I was a feminist before I even knew the word. And I can't count how many times I saw, my mom mistreated because she was a working class woman with a Southern accent. That experience made me into a staunch feminist. But I think it's important, and I only share this about myself to make this point, that one can be a staunch feminist and care about women's equality while also being worried about the men's crisis. And I think in the 2020 world, do we live in a politically polarized kind of environment? Now everything becomes a contest of one against the other. And this is not a zero-sum game. We're worrying about men somehow it means that you're going to worry less about other groups, okay? And I think we have to worry about men struggling to adjust to a changing world. To understand how men have adjusted to a world of greater gender equality, I spoke to Frank Spring. Spring is a liberal political consultant. In 2024, he conducted a deep ethnographic study of adult men. His team studied men across demographic groups. Put that in English. There were some Democrats running for political office. They wanted to understand male voters. They got Frank Spring to have a huge number of men to agree to participate in a 2 or 3 day long study where they spent hours asking them a series of questions, not political questions, but just getting to understand who they are and what they were concerned with, okay? And what's interesting is that this liberal political consultant had the results surprised him. He discovered that these men, quote, possess no resentment at feminism, but now it's what they said. They told him they had something to lose. Their greatest fear was, quote, that someone, meaning an employer, could make you work a job that you hate, end quote. And the emotional toll would force him to go back to being a material provider only. Across the board, their metric for a successful life, according to what they told him, was, quote, they only want to matter to someone, end quote. Their highest priority revolved around being, quote, being reliable for those who are important to you. All of this is a long way of saying that they spent 2 or 3 days talking to Republican, Democrat, independent men and found some surprising results, that there wasn't a backlash against women's equality, that there's not a backlash against feminism, that men actually said that they appreciated this new world in which, as dads and fathers and husbands, they were emotionally involved in their families' lives. And what their greatest fear is that they're going to work a job in which they're so miserable that they were not going to have the energy to be engaged in their household. And Frank was telling that how that really surprised him, that what you read in the media is that a men's movement is anti-feminist and anti-equality, and what he found was the exact opposite, that men had embraced this new world, okay? So what he found is that men are experiencing what he termed cultural vertigo, right? They're kind of dizzy from a rapidly changing world. Social justice, I've made this point, need not be a zero-sum game. A baseball game is a zero-sum game, right? The Pirates won last night. Who's the Geeks? Los Angeles, the Dodgers. Okay, so the good guys, finally. Dodgers lose, right? Zero-sum game. This is why sports are great. Somebody wins, somebody loses. But making the argument that social justice need not be a zero-sum game. We can walk, meaning address issues of race and misogyny, and chew gum, meaning heed problems of class and working class men, all at the same time. And if you're interested in understanding Trumpism, not demeaning it, but understanding it, the latter is paramount. Working class men and their issues are not just a matter of gender. Nearly 2/3 of all men, 64%, are working class, and a bit more than half of them are white. Almost 8 of 10 prime working age Latino and African American men are working class. By definition, working class men and their travails is also a matter of racial justice, but not in the way that today's social justice left envisions. 2025's color line is not the racial divide of the past. In the 60s, to be African American, right, was to be, by definition, in the American underclass. And I found this number to be stunning. In 1960, only 10% of African Americans held a middle class job. 10%, meaning the other 90% of African Americans were either working class or poor. The Civil Rights Revolution changed that equation. Today, nearly 50% of African Americans are middle class. To be sure, the African American hold of the middle class is more tenuous than that of whites, but the Civil Rights Revolution has changed the economic prospects for Black Americans. In 2012, this is William Julius Wilson, the preeminent urban sociologist of his era, reissued his classic, The Declining Significance of Race. This book came out in the late 1970s. He re-released it in 2012. And so in this 1978 book, he discovered that class had become stickier than race in determining life chances, meaning even by the late 70s, if you were born working class or poor, that was more determinative in whether you remained working class or poor, rather than what race that you were born, okay? So for middle class African Americans, this is good news. For working class Black Americans, it means they, like their white and brown brethren, get polarized by a globalized economy. Yes, poor African Americans get macerated worse than others, but the diploma divide, not race, is the key determinant. Drive on any one of America's 955 Martin Luther King boulevards, and you will see reasons for pessimism. African American men are disproportionately victims of police violence, but a deeper dive shows that poor Americans of all races are the disproportionate victim of a militarized police state. This is Wilson's thesis in action. Racism matters. Indeed, class exacerbates existing racial disparities. But more and more, class, not race, is the key to understanding the roots of 2025 America's underclass. If you want to understand why working class African American and Hispanic men shifted toward Trump, look no further than Wilson's classic book. In relation to Biden in 2020, Harris's white working class support dropped slightly, 37 to 34%. It was her vote share of the non-white working class that fell nearly 3 times as much. Biden earned 73% of the non-white working class. Harris took just 65% of that vote. And much of that decline came with men. Nearly half of Latino men under 40 voted Trump in 2024. Approximately 3 in 10 African American men below age 45 voted for Trump, about double that of 2020. The electoral numbers tell a very clear story. Something is up with the working class men of all races. And to attribute their votes to Trump and against Harris as just sexism is reductionist. The forces for this are far more complex. Paychecks matter. Higher wages fuel optimism and better life prospects. But for Dr. Sever, material forces only explain so much. She sees an American working class in the grips of a culture of despair. For her, the sources of that emanate from the intangibles derived from a culture that are driven by the social justice-minded intelligentsia. To Sever, quote, elites drive what is meaningful to a culture and what we recognize as valuable. Intellectuals drive what society values and what we are about, end quote. She sees that the cultural signals sent to working class Americans amount to, quote, my identity is not worthy and how I live is not good, end quote. Culture, just as much as the paycheck, is driving this working class culture of despair. You doubt Sever, which is a good thing to do. We should be skeptical of things that people say. In the early post-war era, the American intelligentsia, left liberals, viewed the working class as the primary vehicle for progressive political change. Put another way, they romanticized and valorized, okay? Authors and artists on the political left and the center, ranging from Betty Friedan and Norman Rockwell to Paul Robeson and television shows like The Honeymooners and All in the Family, valorized or romanticized the working class. Times changed. By the 1970s, the left-leaning intelligentsia blamed the white working class for the nation's racism, chauvinism, and imperial tendencies. Elite opinion gravitated into popular culture. Today, the American working class, in particular, the white working class male, is either a punchline or a punching bag for the social justice left. Richard Butch, a sociologist who studies media, examined more than 400 situation comedies. He found a television mainstay is the working class male buffoon. Butch writes of these characters, quote, "They were dumb, immature, irresponsible, and lacking in common sense. The man was typically well-intentioned, even lovable, but no one to respect or emulate," end quote. From Peter Griffin on The Family Guy to Al Bundy on Married with Children, how he paid for that house on a shoe salesman's salary nobody knows, to the entire cast of Honey Boo Boo or Duck Dynasty, the white working class, and especially men, have become a punchline. This is not merely an American phenomenon. Lord Melvin Bragg, a BBC broadcaster and author, noted about British TV, quote, "I'm not a fan of the working class being mocked. We've got to the stage where the working class has been turned into a cliche," end quote. In Britain, the CHAB, C-H-A-B, has become an archetypical working class television character. This acronym is born from a bureaucratic term. So in Britain, they don't call it public housing, they call it council house. So CHAB means council house and violent. So if you're a social worker going into British public housing and somebody was violent, you would call them a council house, CH, and violent, or CHAB, a CHAB. So a CHAB in British television wears a tracksuit, sports cheap hairdos, and they also provide low-rent humor on British TV shows. Owen Jones, who penned the book, CHAB, The Demonization of the Working Class, discovered his idea at a fancy upper-crust dinner party. In the middle of the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009, when everybody was losing their job on both sides of the Atlantic, a dinner host at a very kind of upper-crust party said, quote, "It's sad that Woolworths is closing. Where will all the CHABs buy their Christmas presents?" End quote. Even social democratic Sweden is not immune. Goran Eriksson, another academic, finds that Swedish television mocks the working class, quote, representing them as slow, inflexible, undynamic, and unstylish, end quote. David French, a New York Times columnist and conservative, observes, quote, "Mocking poor whites is among the last acceptable forms of bigotry," end quote. This holds true on both sides of the Atlantic. Donald Trump and the perception that rural working class whites comprise his base has only exacerbated this condescension. Derision of the rural white working class is gendered. The focus of the ire and stereotypes are aimed at men. Working class white women are also demeaned by cultural elites, but it is men who bear the brunt of the cultural bile. Lindley Thorne, she's a liberal political director for the Virginia-based Rules Round Game, told me that the Democrats' rural white strategy amounts to, quote, "We have the best policies, you dumb hicks," end quote. Remember, these are all liberals talking about, liberals in the Democratic Party. Jess Piper, I'm sorry? Okay. Jess Piper, the liberal executive director of Blue Missouri, told me bluntly, quote, "Liberals hate rural people. She is constantly told by urban educated counterparts, quote, 'You got what they voted for,' end quote." In their 2024 best-selling book, White Rural Rage, Tom Schaller and Paul Waldman exemplify this. The duo sold scads of books and garnered loads of media attention for a thinly researched book of rule bashing. I mean, this is an absolutely terrible book that sold millions of copies. The academics who were quoted in this book actually wrote a series of essays denouncing the authors because it was just so bad, but it sold in urban and suburban areas of the upper middle class because it told them what they wanted to hear. And it confirmed their stereotypes and their biases. And we created a term that's called rule bashing. And rule bashing is largely aimed at white working class men. This is Lisa Pruitt. I've gotten to know her a little bit over the last few years. She's a University of California Davis law professor who studies rule bias in the law. She's also, a self-described liberal who grew up near where I did in rural Arkansas. Like Sever, she leads a blue lights, but was reared in what is now a red world. She writes of the rule bashing she sees, quote, "Indeed, among the denizens of the largest cities and coastal elites, rural Americans have become a proxy for the working class, the uncouth, the uncultured, and yes, the illiberal. I contend that social progressives reserve their greatest contempt and increasingly also their ire for whites in rural America. the vast majority of whom are working class, end quote. And I say again, Jess Piper, Lindley Thorne, forget my friend's name, Lisa Pruitt, these are all liberals who are saying this. This elite condescension does not go unnoticed. Anthony Flaccavento is yet another liberal who ran twice for Congress in rural Virginia. Today he works with the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, which is dedicated to healing political polarization. He told me rural whites, quote, believes Democrats just don't like them. In this case, Democrats or liberals are synonyms for cultural and intellectual elites. To punctuate this, he said that his neighbors are, quote, damn proud, and they feel preached to and demeaned. Liberals in their experience don't respect working people or believe the educated thinks they might have something to learn from you. They are utterly and wholly aware of this, end quote. Closer to home is Kat DiVittorio, the Assistant Director of the Corey Higher Education Council. She is also a self-described Democrat who has no love for Donald Trump. But living in Corey, she feels the elite condescension of rural, white, working-class Americans. She recently told me, quote, the Democrats quit being the party of normal. They are the party of we are smarter than you. We are better than you. What kind of party runs on a we are better than you platform, end quote. This elite condescension is primarily aimed at working class men. Professor Sever thinks a social and political zeitgeist that demeans the working class in league with the diploma divide has created this culture of despair. Due to her working class roots, Sever is sensitive to working class depictions. She thinks that it's the responsibility of intellectuals to be sophisticated in how we depict working class Americans. She also understands some of the challenges. She told me they, the working class, can't always package their ideas in the same way. Our job is to take everyone seriously and translate them. Instead, we vilify and shame them, end quote. Put another way, I come from a working class background, okay? But I'm a fancy academic now. And academics and professors, we have a certain way of talking about race or gender or LGBTQ that's different from the way the rest of America talks about things. And to be part of our world, you kind of have to know that vocabulary. And I know when I talk to members of my family, they don't always use that vocabulary. Now I know their parts and I know what they mean. But I think Cassandra's right about this. Too often when journalists and academics kind of go out and talk to non-college educated Americans, they don't hear the language they're used to hearing, and too often will assume kind of the worst things about people. And what Dr. Sever is saying is that it's our job to translate what people mean. Just because they don't use the language that we do doesn't mean that they have some sort of innate bias. That's all that means. Now, Sever's an ethnographer, and she studied or surveyed her elite students to assess and understand these depictions as they emanate from the social justice left. Now, I've talked about the social justice left, so let me define it. According to the Pew survey, the social justice left comprises 7% of all American voters. Majority white, they are the second youngest of the nation's political typology groups. They are also one of the two groups with the highest share of college graduates. No group turns out to vote more or donates more money to candidates at a higher rate than the social justice left. Now, their numbers may be small, but they occupy the heights in the nation's culture, media, and academic institutions. I mean, if you do a study of political candidates, presidential candidates, Senate candidates, and the people who run their campaigns or staff their offices, it's an enormous percentage who come from these elite institutions and generally embrace this worldview. So their numbers are small, but they have a lot of cultural and political power. David Brooks writes about the social justice left. He finds the central idea emanating them is in opposition to what they call privilege. And this to Brooks is the contradiction at the heart of the movement. Disproportionately born to wealth or upper middle class comfort and schooled at elite institutions, Brooks writes, quote, you have to prove yourself to yourself and others that you're on the side of the oppressed, end quote. Because they possess the very class advantages they also disavow, the cognitive dissonance, which is a fancy word for saying there's ideas you have and then there's how you behave. right? And that conflict is cognitive dissonance, right? So they believe that privilege shouldn't exist. So, but they also kind of have all these class advantages. So what this cognitive dissonance does is have a radicalizing effect on them. Musa al-Gharbi is a sociologist at Stony Brook, and he's written a book called We Have Never Been Woke, which is a study of the social justice left. And what he finds is that what separates the social justice left from every other demographic is that starting in 2011, the largely white social justice left began proffering, quote, woker positions on the issues of race than the average black or Hispanic person. So basically, Garvey is saying, yeah, Brooks is right. It has this kind of radicalizing effect on the members of the social justice left. To prove that you're against privilege, you take the leftmost positions possible. A social justice leftist does not merely believe that race matters, that racial advantages persist. Those are so obvious as to be almost banal conclusions, okay? What makes the social justice left distinct is that it sees social justice as a zero-sum game of the oppressor versus the oppressed. To aid the oppressed and stand on, you'll hear they use this term a lot, the right side of history, requires not gender or race-blind neutrality. Rather, social justice calls for tilting the scales against the oppressor. And often in today's world, that oppressor is white working-class men. Sever studies the consequences of Brooks' radicalizing effect and how Garvey's oppressor-oppressed dichotomy. In her ethnographic study of elite college students, the oppressor is invariably a straight white working-class men. She told me, quote, if you ask them, meaning the students, they'll say, I like men, but when she probes, how do you feel about men? Then they open up. Sever is told by these students, quote, if I was born a bio man, I wouldn't be a toxic man, end quote. She has discovered a knee-jerk belief that men are toxic inherently, even if they, quote, do the work. Now, this isn't everybody in America, but it is. I mean, if you go to an elite institution, you are going to be marinated in these beliefs. And if you go to an elite institution, you get the job at NBC News or the New York Times or the elite college. And these beliefs, though held by a small number of Americans, kind of permeate our elite institutions. So there's a knee-jerk belief that men are toxic. She finds this to be a pervasive belief with her elite college students. She concludes that these social justice leftists believe, quote, there is something authentic that marginalized men possessed. Bio men can never have this, end quote. Sever confided to me, this is how they see reality. Bio white men are inherently repressive. You doubt me? The term men suck has become a common refrain that some of my female students will just parrot out loud in a classroom. A couple of years ago this happened, and I was kind of stunned, right? I mean, they said it in the middle of class, not in the hallway, right? And without any sense that their male classmates might take offense. They just say it. And, you know, my wife's college professor, we talked about this. I mean, this is something that even female professors taught her. If we wonder about why men's participation in higher education has plummeted, we should think about how welcome men feel on college campuses. I say this as a professor. In the last 10 years, it's tangible. It is really tangible. I can understand. I mean, as a male faculty member, I feel less welcome in higher education as a whole. Gannon is not hot benefits, okay? But I'm telling you, at elite conferences, like, you can feel it, okay? And again, we've created very inclusive environments for young women, and that is great. I'm a feminist. But the environment in higher education, especially the humanities, is alienating for men. Not in every class, not in every professor, not in every campus, but it's a reality. You know, it's real. This is the state of academic freedom in 2025 higher education. You know, Donald Trump has had his high-profile kind of attacks on academic freedom at American universities. I'm not a big fan of those policies. But the social justice left is also undermining higher education from within. I mean, we have some movements against academic freedom and higher education occurring on both the right and the left. You know, on television, I go to great efforts to comment on politics as a neutral observer. And I try to never let my partisan thoughts kind of, you know, intervene, and random erudite will come up to me and like, hey, I appreciate what you say on TV, I can't tell how you vote. And I was trained as a political historian that that's our job, is we have our partisan feelings, but when we talk about things, we take off our partisan hat. I taught a class on the 2024 presidential election, and I was told by our friend Fulbright, who took the class, that students before the class got into small debates, not arguments, but debates about which way I was voting, right, Trump or Biden. And I took that as, you know, as a marker of my professionalism, that you can't, you know, tell which way, you know, I vote. And I only share this because I am critiquing the social justice left in this, okay? That, you know, what am I ideologically? I'm a registered Democrat. I call myself an old school Harry Truman Democrat. I watch Robert Kennedy's speeches and I cry. I met the great John Lewis, the civil rights icon, Martin Luther King's lieutenant. He came here years ago. It was a thrill of a lifetime. We brought Diane Nash to campus, who, with John Lewis, led the student wing of the civil rights movement, spawned it. You know, I'm an old school liberal Democrat. And I only say that because I'm criticizing within the tent. You know, I'm not a conservative criticizing the left. I am somebody from inside the tent who's kind of talking about what's going on in left liberal intellectual and political circles. And I think that gives me a bit of credibility. Tell you another kind of personal story. A couple of years ago, I was driving down the road talking to my stepdaughter, who was graduating at that time from Drexel. And she was talking about her classes and what her reading list was for the fall. And she kind of exclaimed, "Not another book by a white man." And I remember my wife and I, we both kind of laughed about this. You know, I have a good relationship with Fran. And she goes to a quite liberal institution, and I can guarantee you her reading list is not dominated by white male authors. And what that reveals is that in elite spaces, like just criticizing men has become the substitute for thinking, right? And there's a lot to criticize. I mean, once upon a time in academia, reading lists were too dominated by white men, and we should have diverse reading lists by a diverse set of authors. And I just shared that because, you know, I kind of notice these things, and I see how pervasive it is. And, you know, Fran is now in graduate school at Harvard, right? We're very, very proud. And this is a bizarre thing to say. I went to graduate school, and I studied with the whole host of conservatives, and I learned so much from them. I learned to respect the conservative intellectual tradition. I learned to respect that conservatives and Republicans were often right. I learned to respect that Democrats don't have a monopoly on truth. I walked out of graduate school shorn of at least hopefully shorn of ideological bias, because I went to school with people who didn't think like I did. And my stepdaughter will have gone to 10 years of school and never knowingly taken a class with a Republican. And I find that just bonkers frightening. And I think that just tells you something, you know, about where we are. Sever concludes that with the social justice demographic, you know, men are not valued, they're even loathed. She believes her study is a representative example of the social justice worldview emanating from elite universities. 20 years ago, Ivy League schools were heterodox places that merely tilted left. That's the graduate school world that I lived in. Absolutely. Today, elite universities do not really tilt left. The social justice left predominates. In the American South, University of Tennessee, University of Florida, they're literally building brand new departments so that they can hire people that have heterodox views, because you could never get a job in those departments because faculty control the hiring if you don't march to the social justice drumbeat. And there's nothing wrong with being a social justice leftist. The problem is when there's only one worldview. That's the issue. Okay? my wife and I, we like moody Scandinavian murder shows, and this is just an example we'll kind of end with. We binged, in the late spring, the early summer, my Norwegian is bad, the R murders. We loved it, right? But like so many programs aimed at highly educated Westerners, it reflects how the social justice left worldview has been mainstreamed, right? The problem is not that the lead detective is a young woman. In fact, she was an interesting character, she was a good actor. The issue is that every single baddie on the show was a one-dimensional man. The only complex character, Anton Luden, was gay. Otherwise, the men, and I'm not making this up, were either bumbling, human traffickers, murderers, or they abused their spouses. I liked the show. It's a murder show. It was escapist. It was fun. But it was like watching gender roles from the 1950s, right? It's like watching I Love Lucy. You can still think it's funny, but also wonder why does Lucy have to get permission from Ricky to spend the money, right? But it was a Freaky Friday version of this. Working class Americans live downstream from elite culture. The oppressor-oppressed dichotomy has, like a virus, escaped the laboratory of the university. And Sever believes the class of Americans most often depicted as oppressors, unsurprisingly, don't feel valued. From television to politics, she told me, when we value certain identities, we are not valuing everyone, the white guy. When we lean in to value some, others are left out. She finds that young social justice elites conclude, quote, not being educated, being working class, those jobs are profane. Working class, what's to like about them? This is the ethos of elites, end quote. The message sent to white working class Americans, according to Dr. Sever, is nothing short of, quote, you horrible people are all racists. Sever told me, a culture needs to value all people. You can't differentially value people. That is the code of a liberal society. We no longer even make this claim, end quote. I've come to conclude that there is no politics but class politics. The men's crisis is largely a working class male crisis. And the social justice left, and look, some of these people are my friends, they're my colleagues. Like I said at Gannon's not a hotbed of this, but all throughout academia, right? They're bad people. They're not, they're well-intentioned, but they're blind to their unwitting role in creating a culture of despair. And the path kind of through our tumultuous era, right, is through an intelligentsia that puts class at the center and ceases this oppressor-oppressed paradigm. The men's crisis is at the root of our tumultuous politics of Trumpism, as Trumpism's reaction on the left. And the way out of both is a viable cultural and economic agenda that places the working class, not the professional middle class like me, at the center. Thank you. I know we're competing with really nice weather. Happy to take some questions at this point if you have any. Talk about the pilots. Yes.
Yeah, the solution.
Yeah.
What's the solution? Are there people out there that are essentially, what should we be doing, and how can we?
Well, I think it's
toward death?
yeah. I think the first thing we have to do is just recognize that the working class, and we live in Erie. How can this be? But this tells you, like, I live in an ivory tower. The working class have taken it on the chin economically for the past 50 years. I ran across this in the 1950s. Half of all of America's jobs were in the Rust Belt. We were center of an economic dynamo that was the United States. And we think about kind of working class Americans. Do I need to get back on the camera view?
I just
Okay, I can stand back up here. Yeah, my bad. So we have to recognize that, right? That the working class have taken it on the chin. And Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, hasn't he pointed that out? He's made that very real, is that the working class, they deserve the same chances of middle-class security the same way that a college professor does. And at the same time, I think we have to understand that it's working-class men economically have been hit because it's their jobs that have been offshored, right, more so than women, and that we have a culture that, in pursuit of feminist equality, I think has demeaned men. Does that make sense? And I think just recognizing it might be half the battle. Does that make sense? And we've become almost kind of immune. Am I the only one? If you watch TV, the male buffoon, do other people kind of see this?
Very much.
Yeah, and as a man, once I realize, I get tired of it. And I think just seeing it, I think is part of it, because I think that we just don't see it. And and then just being able to talk about it, because I know this when I first started talking about this with my wife, like, hey, like we need to be more cognizant of working class men and their economic gains and their place in the culture. She put up her fist at first, right? Because she's been a victim of gender discrimination and pay disparity at a former university, right? And so she was like, and I'm like, no, we can do both at the same time. And I think that's really important. Does that make sense? Is to say paying attention to men is not saying problems with sexism are solved. Does that make sense? And I think it's recognizing that. And that's why I go to great pains to say, when we recognize the problems that men have, what we aren't saying is we don't need to pay attention to sexism. So just being able to say it out loud, I think, is part of it. And beyond that, those are big questions, right? Like, how do you? But I think starting to say that you shouldn't have to have a college degree in order to be middle class. I think that needs to become something that we say and something that we make into policy. Because isn't that basically what we tell kids these days?
Well, what's interesting is lots of coach for in school.
Yeah.
And the seniors, everybody's going, what school you go to?
Yep.
Everyone's asking, what are you going to do when you get out of school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my wife and I recently traveled to Australia. It was totally different. The parents were ecstatically talking about their child going to be a mason, to be a contractor.
Yeah.
This is what we've done. The people we met, no one talked about where the kids are going to go to school next. So talking about what their career was going to be.
Yeah.
In the trades or whatever. It was a total different field as a culture.
Yeah, we only talk about 4-year degrees. We're really bad at talking about the trades, which are good jobs, right? And men and women can both do them. I'm a college professor, and we don't do a good enough job at any university in helping students turn a degree program into a job. But 18-year-old boys, and I once was one, right? We're not always the best candidates for college. I was 20 when I started, which is the best thing ever. And you work with, we're knuckleheads at that age. I mean, we should go to the military or something for a couple of years. But we have I don't know what high school classes are like. We have college classrooms that I think are, and this is good, they're very attuned to our female students. But I think they're alienating for many male students, and they feel they feel kind of lost. And there's not enough. How many male teachers do you have? Where do you teach?
I think I'm just I'm a coach.
Oh, coach. Okay.
And that's what goes on at school. I can see it, and I can see it even when I'm standing back. I'm not in academia at all.
Yeah.
I'm a retired business person, and I watch the teachers even where you go to school, because they're in the bubble.
Yeah.
They're in the academic bubble.
Yeah.
And a lot of these folks are teaching business and never ran a business in their life.
Yeah.
So how do we get kids to realize there is opportunity down the path?
Yeah.
America doesn't seem like we're doing a very good job at that.
Now we try to. There's a lot of young people who are very smart, and maybe they shouldn't go to college when they're 18 or go to college at all, and that's fine. But I think we have in America. I mean, it's true to generally to be solidly middle class and secure. you have to go to college unless you're a plumber or go to these different trades. And we don't have these kind of pathways. It's sort of like you inherited from your family. Your dad's a plumber, your mom is this, and you learn it that way. But that kind of occurred to me because during the crash in 2008 and 9, 10% unemployment, and there was this mortgage crisis. And I think at Gannon, I think I had a pay freeze 1 year. And it's like I lived in a totally different America. And then stupid me, I was surprised when Donald Trump won. I was surprised because I was insulated and I was out of touch. And that's why I started doing a lot of political journalism and talking to people so I wouldn't be out of touch again. And it's like, duh, people are mad and they have a right to be upset, I think. And I think the men's, the roiling politics of our time, Trump wins because he wins the male vote, whether you like him or not. It doesn't matter. And Trump is venting their anger. And sometimes things that Trump said I don't agree with. But sometimes when Trump says things, I can at least sift through them and go, his point. I might not put it that way. But, and I think a lot of his supporters feel that way. Right? I mean, I talk to them all the time. They're like, I wouldn't say it like that. But, he is saying something that they feel in a way that the Democrats don't. And our problems go deeper than politics. It's about culture and it's about the pocketbook. Yeah.
I think sort of sticking to your point about how do we get kids to know that they have different paths. I think, in my mind, that's sort of the failure of the parents. I think a lot of parents have the idea in their mind that, they get a kid up through high school and then send them off to college and it's like they're done. And they get them to college and they're going to take care of them there and they're going to figure out their life.
Yeah.
Without actually teaching them the things that they need to know about life beyond high school.
Yeah. I mean, Max, did you go to Gannon?
Yeah.
Okay, and I know, but I mean, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I mean, how much help did you get from professors on career paths?
My bachelor's is philosophy.
Okay.
So, there's not a lot there, but not until I entered education.
Yeah.
There's no really where to go with that. But I was a seminarian too.
Yeah.
I was going to be a priest.
Yeah.
That was a pretty limited.
Okay.
path, but
So
it's not traditional.
maybe not a representative. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
when people go to college, right? College, we're professors. We can have some ideas. We can get you an internship. But I mean, I think you're right. There's a lot of, they're in college. And again, it's good for kids to figure things out. But there's especially a lot of young men, I think, struggle on American college campuses. And a lot of young men who don't go to college. I have a 25-year-old nephew. He hasn't had a job in 2 years. And I think that, it's stunning to me. My grandparents should have killed me. But I think that's become normal. And I think there's a whole generation of do you have some friends who are kind of lost like this?
I'm in my senior year.
Okay.
There.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of guys that never went to school, unemployed, living with their parents. That's very normal.
Yeah.
So.
And they just kind of feel lost.
Yeah, or maybe don't realize how they're okay with that. It's like they're okay with that lifestyle. They don't think that there's anything wrong with it.
You don't think they're depressed deep down inside?
But yes.
Oh, okay. But they don't know it.
Right, but if you talk about, moving out, getting a job, that sort of thing doesn't
But I think we prepare them, though. They've been going to school for 12 years. All of a sudden it gets cut off. It's going to school for 4 years. I'm familiar with that game.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with this other game. I think we've got a net to catch them somewhere.
Yeah.
They just go on.
Yeah, they just fall off, like the face of the earth. And, and that doesn't happen, and I'm happy that it doesn't happen to young women, right? It's great, but it is happening. Something's going on. I know that's a very academic term. Something is going on. But in academia, to talk about this still is controversial, believe it or not.
Part of it may be, the stable environment isn't there anymore. Religious environment isn't there. The workforce environment isn't there.
Yeah.
Family structures not what it used to be. So it's kind of like they're trying to find all this.
Yeah. No, I mean, the left has pushed to secularize society, and like when you take off the guardrails of going to church on Sunday or synagogue or mosque, some people can handle that, but there's not a small number of people who can't. And I agree. I mean, but there is a resurgence, especially with young men, actually, of going back to church, and they're going back to like Orthodox churches and so this is something that's right in like traditional Catholic churches. So this is something you see.
Yeah, actually, I was reading a Catholic Register article. The Catholic Church this year introduced or baptized the most people they have in a very long time.
And this is good news, right? Isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Beyond saving souls. I think it totally from a secular standpoint, as someone who wants America to succeed.
Right.
People need guardrails. This is good, this is bad. And you need community on Sunday to reinforce it, or a Wednesday night, right? And you need religious leaders. And young men are lonesome. Yeah, when I was in grad school, I had I forget which, I was playing Madden, right? And because I love football. And I remember I stayed up till 5 in the morning playing it one night. And I went out to walk my dog, and other people were starting their day, and I was ending mine. And I thought, this is a bad idea. And I gave away my game system to like Goodwill that afternoon. Because I understood just how dangerous those, especially for men. We could play those stupid things for, I don't know, like days. That's what your friends do, don't they?
Yeah, well, my roommates used to work constantly just playing video games. I never saw them with just Ezreal all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way of avoiding life, right? I mean, it can be a nice diversion, but I think when there's some good news out there. I mean, young men, young people are looking for some answers, and we haven't given them, we haven't given the community and the institutions that we were born with, and so maybe there's a rebirth.
So how do you inoculate academia to kind of move back a little bit?
I've seen, this is something that my wife was even telling me this. What you're seeing are highly educated elite students not going to schools in the Northeast, where they had a lot of the protests, especially Jewish students, but even beyond Jewish students. And they're going to these more heterodox state schools that have created these alternative kind of programs. Because what they're in search of is free-flowing ideas.
Balance too. Right?
Yeah, no, it's what universities should be. You should have a conservative, you should have a liberal, and no, you shouldn't bring your politics in the classroom. My favorite professors were always people I couldn't tell how they voted, because I didn't want to, that doesn't matter. But so, how do you fix that? I think people are gonna, it's gonna hit them in the pocketbook, I think. And you're gonna have some big donors who already, I mean, you've seen Harvard and Yale, everything that Trump's doing with the Ivy League schools, I don't think is necessarily wrong. Some of the stuff I do, but
Style's not good, but
it's not, those encampments, and I'm no fan of the Israeli policy in Gaza, but those encampments were, it was just ridiculous. People couldn't go to class, which is the point of a university. So you had a question, ma'am? Yeah.
Well, it seems to me that then had to do some of the work, that there was a model of masculinity that got worn over, beat up, discarded, rejected, and then nobody's really sure what masculinity is supposed to look like anymore.
Yeah.
And I think men need to step up and say, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you dominate women, you assault women, you push women from the table. But there's a lot of young men that I know that are lost, like you saying, that they don't really know what it means to be a man anymore. And really only to show him what that looks like.
Yeah, this is something in the Boys and Men's book. He has it's really the numbers in Britain and the US of the number of men who teach K through 6. So how do you learn how to be a man? You have a teacher, right? Somebody who's smart, who's interested in the world, and is a man, right? And that's a model, especially like with homes where you have single, moms. I had a single mom. I mean, you're right. We have to do the work, and there have to be models out there of men who aren't Archie Bunker, right? In which you can have a balance. I mean, I was lucky. I had a grandfather who was an extraordinary model, right? Who did half the housework, just because it was the right thing to do. But most young men don't have that. And you're right. It is up to us. I mean, men are lost, and part of this is we have to say, man, get a job and do the work. And no wonder women don't want to date you. What you should do if girls don't want to date you and you like girls is maybe you should change your ways. And so I agree with you. This is not about saying women need to come save us and, American culture needs to come save men. But it is, if men have to do 70% of the work, at least 30%, I don't know what the percentages are, is to recognize it.
Right now, there's a shortage of teachers because it goes up and down like this.
Yeah.
So there should be, in my opinion, a really concerted effort to get men into teaching.
Yeah.
Because, that's really where young men, see their first role models outside of the family.
Yeah. I mean, why? I mean, you could have a 21st century John Kennedy making it into a patriotic call for young men. You want to make a difference and you want to have a job and you have respect, go be a 5th grade teacher for 5 years, right? Maybe you'll hate it and do something else, but maybe you'll love it. I couldn't agree more. That's it. Young men need models, and we don't have enough of it, early on, and coaches have to fill in that gap. I'm sure you are a role model to most of your team, right?
Yep, they're seeing a different generation, sure.
Yeah.
When you stand in front of one.
And they don't have many men involved in their lives?
Some of them don't.
Yeah.
Some of them did it, some did it out right away.
Yeah. Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Really? What's the marker?
Behavior.
It's really interesting. Are they more just defiant?
They're not connected.
It's so interesting.
They want to be part of the team, but they don't know how to connect with the team.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. This is kind of what you're talking about. These young men with, your friends who don't know how to kind of connect to society. It's a real profound problem of young men who are just kind of socially and culturally lost. And I think it fuels political radicalism on the left and the right, Whether you're the Bernie Bros, remember them, and the Trumpists as well. Because I think our problems are not political. I think they're cultural and social. And we just see it emanating in the ugliness on both sides. That's what I think. Yeah.
I have a comment or a question, I guess, for both of you. Going to school, higher education, I thought the numbers were way down as a percentage of the students that are available that apply to go to a university or a college. Across the board almost, the numbers are way down. And the number of people going to churches is also way down.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is there's 60,000 churches a year that are closing their doors right now. 60,000 a year.
I wouldn't be surprised by that. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I wouldn't be surprised by that.
And
I think it's a population shift too. Like I went to college with someone who was in the seminary, was studying to be a priest. He moved to the south, and I talked to him this summer. They're building churches down there while we're closing churches
Well,
down here.
okay,
So
by that.
I don't know if it's overall. I don't think the overall trend.
But we are rapidly secularizing, especially in rural small town America, right? I mean, it's only older people who are left. But we live in a region with declining number of 18-year-old. More people as a percentage are going to college than they used to, right? Because, I mean, it is the surest way to the middle class. But we live in a region in the Northeast where the number of 18-year-olds are declining.
Sure.
And so what we are seeing, I mean, Gannon just, subsumed or acquired a college in Cleveland, Ursuline College. And there are universities going under left and right, even in the South, but especially in the Northeast every day. So I think it's the same as, and that is about demographic shifts, because the South is booming And, you know, and so I think that is, in southern universities, I think with pressure from the state legislatures, are going to be more heterodox places. They are not going to be as uniformly left. Ivy League's not uniformly liberal, right? Liberals are conservatives there. They're uniformly left. And they're out of step with American society, which is, if not conservative, is most certainly is not interested in the social justice left kind of single answer to everything. But yeah, it's schools and
And then the other comment, when I graduated from high school, I think, oh man, I got made now, I can just take it easy. My dad says to me, he says, what are you gonna do, you know, come fall? Oh, I'll take it easy for a couple of years. He said, you got a choice. You're either going to college or you're moving out now. Ooh, so I look again.
yeah,
And it was fine. I got the degree, and like you said, a degree opened doors up
Yeah.
because most people didn't have degrees back then.
yeah, it's more competitive.
And
People
now
have
you
degrees.
need, you know, beyond
Yeah.
yes, you need a master's or a PhD.
Yeah, 37% of Americans have a bachelor's degree. It's probably doubled what it was 25, 30 years ago. Yeah, and it's that tough love style of parenting is not in vogue, as evidenced by, you know, my nephew, and you know, it's just parents don't want to do that, and you know, it worked with you.
Rust Belt back then, I had 2 jobs. Both union jobs, that make good money.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
And then I went to one job 35 hours a week, and I wanted, again, as a senior, I was falling asleep. I didn't care. I was graduating. My grades were good. It went down to senior year, but hey, I was making money, and I got a degree. So,
yeah. I mean,
and now it's all gone.
yeah, no, yeah, and that is, you know, we realize now. I mean, look, and we're reindustrializing, and there's going to be more advanced manufacturing. I think that's something that we realize, and there's a bipartisan agreement, I think, to, you know, reshore certain kinds of industrial jobs, not labor-intensive, low-wage jobs. Those aren't coming back, but you know, Pittsburgh is on the edge of maybe becoming a real national center of advanced manufacturing. They're going to become an AI data center hub, and with that comes advanced manufacturing. And they're saying that most of the jobs that are going to go there are working class. We shall see. We've heard, how many times have we heard that in the last 50 years, right? But that's what they're claiming. And so we might be maybe realizing that there's a problem, and there's real policy solutions to this. Anything else? I know it's a nice, beautiful evening in September. So, yeah, thank you for coming out. I appreciate it very much.